episode 29 of Politically Conscious. Political consultant Emil Bryant and political strategist Leo Smith return as we discuss MAGA conservative Shelley Winter as he slams Trump's big beautiful spending bill and says both parties are kept on the plantation. We also break down ranked choice voting and expose how Democrats hide racism with classism. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us. Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your mental activist Montoya Smith, along with my two brothers in this political game, Emil Bryant and Leo Smith. Got a lot of cuts today, so hopefully y'all been rocking with us. We're on episode 29, so hopefully I won't have to do long intros. Y'all know us by now. I do want to highlight the goal of this show so people understand we're not simply in this game to be talking heads for politics. The name of the show is Politically Conscious, and our goal is to raise the conscious level on your awareness for when the propaganda comes to you from the media. That's why we review media clips and try to give you a left and right perspective. I got my brother Emil Bryant. I consider him on the left. I got Leo Smith, who comes from a conservative standpoint. I'm a moderator, consider myself an independent. So hopefully between the three of us, you're getting a perspective that sharpens you on your awareness amongst politics so that you're not just guided by the propaganda. And hopefully we want to ultimately lead to your consciousness leading you to acting and getting involved in politics when you understand how important they are to you. So I want to just kind of lead with a big intro, get to quick intros. We got a lot of cuts today so that we can get into this discussion. Our brother Shelley Winters, who's also co-host the show, we're going to lead off with a cut from him, kind of slamming what happened with the big, beautiful spending bill, which we just talked about last week. And I thought it was worthy of talking about Shelley's call out. So big intro for the show, short intros for both of my people. I'll start with you, Emil, and we're going to get to this cut.
Emil Bryant, I am a political consultant. I work with people who want to tell the truth, which doesn't sound like your normal politician. And that's because I believe that every politician, no matter how professional or amateur, should tell the truth, tell it early, tell it often. We can handle it. We are voters and adults. Bad news never gets better with time. Get the people the information they need so they can make a good decision.
All right, Leo, tell them who you are. We're going to get this thing started.
Leo Smith, former Republican National Committee strategist and former Georgia GOP executive, and currently a political consulting and government relations strategist. Looking forward to the conversation today.
No, absolutely. We got both our experts here to give you a perspective, not listen and follow their perspective, but just challenge you to think more consciously about politics. But we're going to start with our brother, Shelley Winters.
This is disgusting. And don't tell me anything about the Democrats, because we have the House, the Senate, and the White House. Nothing to do with Democrats. By the way, I didn't vote for Democrats, so I can't hold people accountable that I did not vote for. See, I'm one of those crazy people that hold the people I voted for accountable to what they told me they were going to do in order to get my vote. I'm just crazy like that. Call me nuts. Listen, years ago, I took a van full of listeners when I was at another station. Trump was coming into Macon, Georgia, and I rented a van. We all chipped in and rented this van, and we drove to Macon. Van, like 14, 15, 16 people. And I'll never forget sitting in that van. And I won't say the name of the person, but she said to me, how are we going to get the African-American community off of the Democrat plantation? And I'll never forget, I turned to her in the van and I said, first of all, don't call them on being on a plantation, because you're not going to move them. They're not going to listen to a word you have to say after that, because that's an insulting statement. And she says, yeah, I understand, but they're not getting anything. They're being taken advantage of. And I said, did it ever occur to you? I didn't say it like this, but I'm saying it now like this. Did it ever occur to you that you're being taken advantage of? No, I'm voting my principles and my issues. No, you're not. MAGA, Republican voters in the state of Georgia and all across this country, we're on the very same plantation that we accuse African Americans of being on. It's just a plantation with a different name, but it is exactly the same plantation. We have a massa, and we do everything massa says, and we smile when they do it. All of a sudden, nobody cares about deficit spending, but you're worried about your grandchildren when the Democrats were spending. Oh, we got to fix it for our grandchildren. Now you don't care because Massa told you not to care. It's hard to be told by a black man on a radio that you're a slave, white people, white Republicans, but I'm telling it to you right now. It's 7:12 at night on a Thursday night before Memorial Day weekend. You are no less a slave than African Americans and Hispanics and women are on the Democrat side. Nothing but a slave to people who lie to you. And you take it, you accept it, and you move on, and you get in your little balloons and your bubbles, and you say, hey, look what we got, our big, beautiful bill given to us by the beautiful, wonderful Mr. Trump. It wouldn't be so bad if you did not tell me you were going to cut spending and cut the deficit. It wouldn't be so bad. We're all on the same plantation.
Emil, that's your brother Shelly doing exactly what you said on an earlier show this year. You said you had no doubt in your mind, based on your interactions via this show, that Shelly, if need be, would hold, quote unquote, his side accountable. I can tell you from being here in Georgia, when you said that on the show, plenty of listeners were shocked and was like, nah, Shelly would never do that. Well, we have it's not the first video we played where Shelly has called out, in a sense, his side of the aisle. But I thought it would be a proud moment for you, just based on you making that assumption, not knowing Shelly as well as myself and Leo knowing him. But you did make that observation, and I wanted to give you credit for that observation. And again, we see our brother Shelly at least expressing his concerns and for his side. Your thoughts on what you just saw, brother?
We are all being called out, and Shelly is doing exactly what I would hope he does, which is call out the people he calls conservatives. This is the part that's hard to hear. They do not love the average voter, and this proves it. The average voter is harmed by this bill. I don't care who you voted for, the average voter is harmed by this bill. And what Shelly's point is very clear is if you tell me you're going to cut the deficit and then you put a budget together that blows the deficit up by $4.6 trillion over 10 years, and Leo gave us a masterclass last week on that 10-year outlook and how BS it is. But the point here is that by any estimate, the bill blows up the budget. So we have to call ourselves out, whether it's MAGA, whether it's conservatives or Republicans. They got to call themselves out. We got to call ourselves out. We got to stop being blind to a side because of what they said and look at what they do. What's the policy? What's the law? What are you pushing through Congress? And what are the effects on the average voter? Whether you're conservative, liberal, or in between, it doesn't matter. What matters is, did you do what you said you were going to do, or did you lie to me once again?
Good stuff. Leo, your thoughts on the big, beautiful bill? You know, obviously, again, Shelly's expressing his frustration. And for me, being in the middle, I'll say this, that respect the frustrations. I'm not personally sure that I understand how even this bill, if you will, connects directly to what I may be concerned with as a voter. But knowing that that's an important issue to Shelly, then he gets to express an area that he says, hey, this is an area that was important to me. I am disappointed in what I see. But everybody doesn't have the same areas that they're concerned about. And at the end of the day, Emil, I've even heard you say you don't get concerned with how big the deficit gets. So because that's your position, I don't know if you even agree with Shelly in that sense. Not that I'm putting it back on you, but I'm just putting out a lot of perspectives. It's not one way to see this thing. Leo, your thoughts on Shelly and whatever you might want to add to the conversation.
Well, I mean, regarding Shelly, let me just say that it's rare that you hear a commentator or journalist, no matter what. Commentators are probably more honest than journalists these days, but it's rare that you can say, "Oh, I remember that van trip that Shelly spoke of. I remember that conversation that he had with the young lady." So what Shelly said, I'm backing it up as a true event that happened and happened often, as a matter of fact. So there's that. The other thing that Shelly is calling out is that delusion of a grandiose romantic idealism about being part of a tribe that is sort of wrapped around in the South. It would be this Southern idealism about, what was reality related to slave and slavery, and the elitism there, like played out in Rex and Scarlet and Gone with the Wind, where Rex on one hand is like, I'm kind of rejecting, I'm being an idealist, I'm being a realist, I'm not the elitist that Scarlet has been romanticizing and wants me to be. So what's happening within the Republican Party's plantation right now is that they still are fighting this reinvention of self thing whenever they feel insecure. And so here as a conservative, I'm not a white conservative, so I don't have that same sort of fantasy kind of world that I'm basing things on. And you get sucked up into, believing the tribal identity more than you do the policy and what's real. So what's real is conservatives like Shelley and I are being betrayed. That what's real is that the conservative Republican platform has always stood for shrinking the size of government, shrinking spending. And now, because we have this romantic revisionism going on, led by our president, we're now totally off the plantation when it comes to, we're out of realism. We're out of realism when it comes to how our budget bill is being presented. And this is going to be an incredible fight. It passed the House by 1 vote. And so that was tight in itself. And now we're in the Senate in negotiation. And boy, are we in for a fight. But what it means more than that is a lot of conservatives have to ask, is our party even a conservative party anymore?
No, good questions. Again, I love this dialogue again. All right, let's go. Let's continue along this path. This is something that I know Emil's going to love, but we're going to start with you, Leo, to respond first.
Let's just talk about Musk overall and Doge. I mean, the promises were, target cutting 150 billion, 2 trillion annually from the budget. So what's been the outcome of these grand projections?
So, yeah, as you said, there's been an enormous amount of commotion. You've had a bunch of people lose their jobs. You've had confusion all over the place. What do we have to show for it? Well, back during the campaign, Trump claimed that he was going to cut $2 trillion from our annual budget. And by the way, our annual budget is $7 trillion. So he would have been talking obviously about a massive, massive cut. They quickly realized that was not successful. In January, they said we'll cut $1 trillion out of the budget. And by the way, the government's fiscal year is now more than half over anyway. But then on April 10th, they lowered it to $150 billion. So 2 trillion, 1 trillion, 150. But even the 150 billion, the New York Times did a very thorough investigation of this. 92 billion of it is unspecified. Nobody knows where that's coming from. Of the other 63 billion, there were all kinds of mistakes, including, for example, a contract for 1.9 billion they claim credit for actually canceled during the Biden administration. So for all the commotion, all the layoffs, all the unhappy people, there's very little to show for it. You can see that most clearly over here, because this tracks federal spending month by month since the beginning of each year back from 2022. And as you would expect, it went up a little bit in 23, a little bit in 24, but it's actually gone up a good bit in 25. So there's still no impact whatsoever on government spending from all of, as I said, the commotion that Musk has created in Washington.
Wow.
So, Leo, we'll start with you. Emil has always called when we were trying to figure out back when they were doing both sides were doing their propaganda, saying, hey, here's the mistakes they're making in Doge, and Doge saying, hey, here's what we saved. And at the time, we didn't know what we were looking at. We were trying to figure it out even on this show. And Emil kept saying, okay, we do have to look at it for real and see what's real. But I think it's just a propaganda machine. And so as they've kept, as you see, this show kept receipts on what Trump had said about it being a $4 trillion cut down to $150 billion cut. And according to what they could actually find, those cuts seem to have amounted to much of nothing. And we are talking about Elon's role, if you will, in this position as well. But Leo, your thoughts on that cut?
Yeah, I don't agree that this has amounted to much of nothing. I think that this is a reset. I think that, we know that in the art of the deal methodology that Trump uses to lead, meaning he always proposes some extreme, level of action. And he's satisfied if that extreme level is rejected or not achieved, but yet something did happen and something has happened. I would argue that people are less aspirational about working for the government. Get a good government job. I mean, I would imagine that now there's not as many people saying go get a good government job as there used to be. I think that's a win. I think it's a win if we cut $1 billion, to be quite honest with you. So I think that we've gone from a place now, yes, we're still, I mean, this bill has still got a ton of spending in and a huge increase in spending, as we discussed last week. However, that we're reducing some of the spending that's happening in the federal government, I think it's a good thing. I don't like how it's hurt some families, some people who've been laid off, but this is a reset. And some of those people are being hired back, but I guarantee you it's the people who are most needed.
Emil, your thoughts to that cut? Again, I just thought you would be a personal fan of it, and I'll say this to you, Leo. I think that's how it's looked at. That it's much of nothing. That's not necessarily my thought. I was just saying I think that's how it looks at least that cut. That's what they're trying to put. That's what they're trying to put out there in their version of even looking at the Doge, if you will. Emil, your thoughts on that cut?
It's been a propaganda machine from day one, and if you want to save money, there is an organization that I am a big fan of called the GAO, where they will find you literally hundreds of billions of dollars per year if you take them up. Hey, Congress, you can listen to the GAO. Hey, executive branch, you can listen as well. So that's part of the propaganda, that as if there was no mechanism already in place. The other part is that it's a distraction. What I want to see Congress do is bring every single person who works for Doge, whether tangentially or directly, into and have them swear what they did with their access to the American people's information. Because right now, I'm seeing no oversight and accountability. So the propaganda machine says, hey, look at all the money we're saving. But the actual work is looking at all of the data that's being siphoned out of the American people's government facilities, government servers, and being used for who knows what. And nobody has reported to Congress on that. So show me the money, show me the data, and show me under oath what you've been doing, because I don't believe you just because you put a website together that says the wall of savings.
Hey, fair enough. And so we hope that's being done. And I think if I'm hearing you clearly, Emil, they're not showing us that it's actually being done. So the problem for you is they could be, but the other issue is they could not be. And that's what you're saying. That where's the transparency? I'm saying that the transparency.
What CNN calls out,
following you. Go ahead.
Yeah, what CNN calls out is somewhat accurate. Of course, they have the CNN propaganda, spin that they're going to do on it. But the other part is that every single organization, every single agency in the government has a Doge person in it. And those Doge people, I do not know any of their qualifications, their credentials. I don't even know if they swore an oath as government employees. I honestly don't know that. And that's something that I would like to know, because as the American people should know, who's accessing our data and to what end. Are there artificial intelligence systems going through the government systems? Were those vetted by any other agency besides Doge before they went in? Are they leaving back doors? Are they honoring all of the security protocols that the federal government is supposed to keep our data sovereign from not just outside actors, but actors within the nation who would exploit that data? Plus, you're seeing the misuse of that data in real time between agencies. The IRS swears up and down their data is not supposed to be used in other ways, but you're seeing that data from IRS migrate over to ICE. So they're saying if you pay taxes, even if you were an illegal or undocumented immigrant, and you pay taxes, that illegal status from the IRS can be used to enforce immigration actions, which was not the way it was supposed to be, which was not the way it was by law. So you got a bunch of stuff happening with Doge that I don't trust is on the up and up. And just because there's a wall of savings doesn't mean they're actually saving the money.
Leo, did you want to say something real quick?
No, I mean, look, let's just deal with the fact. Okay. This is an anti-government administration, okay? So as far as government authority, the authority is the White House. So when you're looking at, what is it, the government administration, what is the GAO? The GAO is the government accountability, right? Mm-hmm. Well, come on, Emil. I mean, the fact is that these guys don't do anything by their own admission. They said, oh, we're not trying to influence things. We're trying to stay out of politics. We're just responding. Well, we're not in a place where conservatives just want someone to only respond and opine. We're not looking for opinion. We're looking for action. And that's why they're not trusted. And so I'm not saying that what Trump is doing and Doge was doing should be things that we should have trusted. But again, this is sort of like when someone says, clean up the room, exact authority over your bedroom, clean up your bed, and you never do it. You go, oh, well, I'll only respond when you ask me to. So eventually mom and dad come and clean up your room and throw away your crap. Okay? This is what's happening. And so we got to hold GAO accountable to doing real work.
Hey, good stuff from both of you. Here's a perspective that I just happened to run across last night. And I was like, hey, I'm a big fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you will. Never thought I would bring him to the political show. I've used him on the Mental Dialogue show before. But he just happened to say something that I thought kind of wraps up this whole conversation as we keep talking about the spending. I just happened to come across it, so I'm definitely curious in both of your thoughts on this.
If you fired all 3 million government employees, how much would you save? You would save 4.3% of the federal budget. That's all. So the government is spending money on something else that represents the bulk of what the federal budget is. Ask a bigger question. If you go and give these trims to all of these agencies, you cut one part of an agency here, you trim it there, and then you say, we saved millions of dollars. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. So to cherry pick bits and pieces of one agency and another on the grounds that that's somehow gonna transform how the government operates, I think is a little short-sighted, a lot short-sighted.
Emil, your turn.
How much did he say you would save if you fired all 3 million?
He said 4.3%.
That's the part that I want us all to pay attention to, because that's the part that matters. It isn't about the individual worker. And to Leo's point, a lot of people relied on the government. In some ways, it was good because it brought many of the best people into the government's service. But it also meant that I always accuse Congress, and Leo knows why. Congress used the federal government as a program to put jobs in their districts and in their states and make sure they had long-term voters. That is a very real thing that has happened, which is one of the reasons why the federal government has gotten bigger and bigger. And although the population got bigger, the services that those people provided didn't match the population growth. So you had a bloated federal government by numbers, not necessarily by the delivery of services. What matters to me is what Neil deGrasse Tyson says. You're not looking at this with a scalpel. You're looking at it with a blunt object, and you're not really trimming the budget. What you're doing is showing people what they want to see. And this is what Leo loves to talk about. You're a politician and therefore an entertainer, and this is entertainment. All these budget cuts are part entertainment, and they're not serving the real purpose. The purpose, as if you really want to do this right, is do the analysis, take some time, and then handcuff the current Congress to its own word. You do the study, and whatever the study says, Congress, you honor that. And you can write a law that does both of those things, so that in the current Congress, you have to listen to the results of a study that force you to make those cuts. And those cuts should be painful across all 50 states and all congressional districts.
Let me, for Leo, I'm gonna let you go. When I hear Emil break down his perspective on how it should be done, I'm also reminded of one time Shelley saying this to you, Emil. He was like, currently with who we have, which I think is a little bit to Leo's point, currently who we have in the office that y'all were both referring to, the auditing system, for example, that the government, he was like, the process would take so long. So even if they got the what you said, the process would take too long. And so I know Shelley felt like for example, the young people that know how to use AI and all that kind of stuff, they could speed up something that would take our government forever to do. So I'm wondering that even in your suggestion, would we get an action within the time frame that would make sense for example, if the current Congress was bequest to do what
We
you were
have an
told.
1,100-page bill that is going through Congress right now. If they can do that, they could do this. This
Okay,
Congress is capable of doing big things if it wants to. Last Congress, they got the, or not the last Congress, but 2 Congresses ago, they did the Inflation Reduction Act and the Build Back Better Act. To tell me that Congress can't do hard things, they got proof that they can.
Fair enough. Leo, again, I just wanted to see what you thought about that. Just hearing it, remembering it from Shelley. Your thoughts, Leo?
Oh, no, I mean, look, I think that, I mean, again, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's a natural physicist. He's not an economist.
Not at all.
But I think but his perspective, you hear often on liberal commentators, you hear that on CNN, MSNBC, this idea that it's not really that much of a cut happening. Well, let me ask you, the listener, if you're making $100,000 and someone says, I can return to you 4% of your money, that's $4,000. Would you not take it? That makes it plain. A cut is a cut. Anything returned and any reduction is going to be beneficial from a conservative reduced spending perspective. The other thing is that if you remove the staff, the decision makers on spending a budget, then the budget's not being spent in many cases. So the money appropriated to say, let's say, an office of environmental services or something, right? If all the staff is gone, the budget is not really being spent as much as it would have been. So it's not just a cut of people. It's also a cut of spending for programs within that. Just being real about it, okay? Not romanticizing, not doing fantasy, realness.
And I love that it is real, but here's the problem. Congress controls the purse strings, and if Congress passes a law that says this is how money's supposed to be spent, you're in violation of that law if you don't do that, which doesn't necessarily come with the kind of consequences we're used to, i.e. jail or a court case. But what it does mean is that the will of the people is being denied by the executive branch, which is not how it's supposed to work.
Well, the will of the people will get denied by Congress.
You need to follow it.
Right? But see, Emil, the spirit of this whole election cycle has been that Trump is winning because the American people have already said that Congress doesn't respond to us. American people left and right said Congress is not responding to us. They're not reflecting our will. So, hey, let this guy be a dictator.
Then we need to be like Brewster's Millions and vote all of them out, or in this case, vote nobody, right? That's what he did in Brewster's Million. Just vote nobody. Because this is the problem. We have all this political inertia, which is easy for someone to disrupt, like Trump, who's going to build a very charismatic kind of following. But there's also the downside to that, and that is that the rule of law becomes the rule of an individual, and we're seeing some of that happen right now. And my fear is that when we do this, we have enough evidence in our nation, whether it's Jim Crow or before, where the will of the people either being that of one of unconstitutionality or worse is enough to keep the inertia the way it is. Jim Crow lasted damn near 80 years. And that should tell us all that just because something is constitutional doesn't mean it's right by the will of the people. And the other side of that is just because a man can get you what you say you want doesn't mean he's right in doing so.
All right. So we've spent, obviously, time on the big, beautiful bill, the president, if you will, and we watched Shelley call out the Republicans. Here's a thought, because we've had good conversations about whether we have a good enough opposition party. And so I saw this cut a while back and it popped up again. I said, you know what? Let's talk about this from a politically conscious perspective. So let me share this cut, and I'm very curious at what both of you have to say about this.
Democrats have now been able to occupy this position of being more progressive on race. And I have not met more racist people than the liberal white people in New York who won't even send their kids to public school.
Yeah.
Like just the really subtle psychological warfare. It reminds me of the racism in England. It's like so
it's
deft.
taken on a lot of the contours of English class-based racism.
Yes, like,
it has. I think for the same reason.
Yeah.
Class became so important to the Democratic Party because they are trying to serve the interests of a donor class who has a lot of money. while keeping the interests for their identity, we're progressive, we're liberals, aligned with working class, poor people, minority people, immigrants. So to reconcile those two things, right? Think about who you have to be to have both of those things exist for you simultaneously. You got to be delusional in kind of the same way that English people are, who will tell me to my face, we don't have racism here. We do have class, but we don't have racism, as if these are two entirely distinct. But you have to believe that when you have this like really structured class system and a monarchy, formal. That's right. And you have this really formal system of immigration, right? And I think the Democrats have oddly kind of a modified version of that for much of the same reasons. Their class politics right now do not align with their race politics.
Leo, I'm going to start with you on this one. Again, a very interesting cut. I think it's very poignant when we say we're at a time right now where you mentioned on the last show that, for example, if a third party is going to rise, I think these type of dialogues, I find a lot of value in that dialogue for specifically for us as African Americans. But your thoughts for what you just saw?
Well, no, I mean, people ask me all the time, and I get it because I'm a social justice conservative, meaning there are certain social justice or civil rights elements that are pragmatic about dignity, that are pragmatic about accountability for the government to its citizen. I'm an American nationalist in my sense of that. I'm not a globalist so much as in my practice. But so the idea of racism, it is structural by default, say in the case of a monarchy, right? And because those people who control the system build the system. And then that monarchy or some of those people came over here and then became dominant here. The fact is that white people are the dominant force in America. And so therefore, systemically, there are going to be some structural advantages for people who all belong to the same tribe. And we're living within that. So the question then is that system intentionally racist in practice rather than in structure? And so in other words, see, that's a nuanced conversation, and we need to have that conversation. And now we're in a time where we can do that. We got great test cases where South Africa is also struggling with the reversal of a true racist system because they came in structurally not the dominant force, and then they reversed it. And that's pure racism there, where you say, we're not even the majority, but we're going to exact control on the economy, the education, the social life, everything as colonists over South Africa. So now we can get to see the different types of racism and have that discussion too. And now we can see, therefore, why we really don't really understand racism and all of its nuances. And that's why I've never really been one to think that it's better to be with progressives. I know progressives like to take credit for, say, when a racial minority has a bit of success. The progressive like to say that's because of what we did, not because of what the racial minority did, which means that the racial minority still doesn't develop self-efficacy, self-actualization, ownership of their own growth. And so it's always the white people who were benevolent to them are the ones who get the credit. That is no way to evolve and develop a dignified, self-actualized self.
And if I can say this real quick in reference to that, if I could interrupt you just real quick in reference to that, and some of the things that you're talking about where, in a sense, they claim because of what we did, and when you actually dig up into history, we did it ourselves. We forced the thing that they just said, okay, we'll vote for this, but we forced, and they take the credit in the way that you said simply by voting for it.
Right. And that's why
in a self-efficacy way. Go ahead. I'm sorry, brother.
And you mentioned ranked choice voting, and I'm very interested in hearing Neil's thoughts on this, because ranked choice voting says that, okay, we're hyper-partisan. We know we are. So you're going to get a choice of choose your first choice candidate on the same ballot question, choose your second. Right. And you can even choose a third.
I mean, Leo, because we're gonna go straight into that next.
Okay, good.
I was setting it up, right? Like just
good.
Thank you. Because we're all having issues, right? Regardless of if you're on a side or not, even me as an independent, we're having our issues. I wanted to point those out. So let me get Emil's thoughts to that actual cut, and then we're going to go straight into explaining and have you help us understand what ranked choice voting is. Go ahead, Emil.
Yeah, so this is, Leo brought up some good points, but I'm going to talk about an opposition party real quick because this is important to our overall discussion. You have two parties who are chasing the same dollars. Wall Street, big corporations. Those dollars are not necessarily in the same interest, represent the same interests of the average voter. So how could you possibly be chasing these big dollars from Fortune 500 companies and then swear up and down you are for the average voter? It doesn't make sense. You're going to have to make that decision. You've heard me say this before. If you want to be an honest opposition party in this environment, you're going to have to say to the big corporations, your dollars are not welcome, but your votes are. Oh, corporations can't vote. What I'm trying to get at here is it's a very important part of the discussion that this class race, they're chasing dollars. And the problem is, if you look at the Fortune 500 disclosures, every single Fortune 500 company gives money to both parties because they hedge their bets. That doesn't bode well for what's supposed to be an adversarial system.
I almost feel like this is an elementary discussion. If you don't understand now that America's more interested in self-interest in money than they are in racism, actually, then you're really kind of lost. I just hate to tell you, if you're a listener and you don't understand that this is about self-serving, even more than racism. Racism is a tool to allow self-serving, but this is really about both sides. Look at Paul Weiss and the law firm that used to be pro-Biden, pro-Democrats, but now they're doing the bidding of Donald Trump because their focus is on money. They're not they're not social justice people. They're give me some money people.
And I will say to other law firms who are their peers credit, they got called out for it, but that didn't stop them because Donald Trump knew, and he said it very clearly, I will hit them in their pocketbook and they'll fold, and they did. Mm-hmm. So it's not about justice. It's not about the Constitution for these people. It's not about the average voter. It's about the dollars and the cents. And if you have that, the way the sister was saying in the clip, then you understand very fundamentally that racism becomes a subservient cause to the overall classism that's happening. And the elites are on the right, they're on the left, and they're also independent. So we have to be very discerning as a voting class, as people who are not elites, that we need to start looking and asking questions, where did that money come from? Because that's what they serve.
This reminds me of a dialogue I've had with plenty of friends who are always wondering, why are you independent? And not saying that I'm dead in the middle. That's not what I'm saying. I'm an independent voter and I vote both sides of the aisle when I go in the voting booth. Like, let me just clarify exactly what I mean when I say that. But a conversation I kept having for the last 2 years that aggravates some of my friends is because of the position that both of you have clarified and said clearly. And most people, I think a lot of people realize it, but sometimes they don't. That where race actually sits in this whole scheme of things. What I used to do these swell 5-minute podcasts, and one of my 5-minute podcasts, I laid out that race, when it came to, for example, Biden and Trump, actually is it's a wash to the extent that you shouldn't listen to it on whether how racist Trump or how Biden was based on whatever thing you're using. There's such a wash. It's not the most important thing, so why use it as a factor? Like I would have that conversation, and people like, so are you saying that he's being one? He's racist? Doesn't matter? I'm like, yeah, actually, it doesn't, considering of all the other policy and other issue things that we have to vote on. So figure out those things, since this one is a wash. And I'm not telling people that are watching me to agree with me, but I am highlighting, when you understand where race sits in the big scheme of things, in my opinion, don't let either party play to the racial aspect and get you out of the policy aspect. And they both do it to their advantage because they know it beholdens you to the vote, whether it's direct or indirect. Be aware of it. That's what I mean by being politically conscious in this case.
One of the most savvy things I ever heard from some of our brothers and sisters from the 60s was, see the politicians as tools and not as advocates.
Woo! Say that again, brother.
Politicians are tools and not advocates. You vote for the people who can advance your agenda. You don't vote for the people who look like, feel like, smell like, sound like, or talk like. You vote for the people who can advance your agenda. And we're seeing results of that in real time because there are people who are voting for what they believe their agenda is, and they're seeing results. There's another side to the equation, though. And that is, if you're going to see politicians as tools, then you got to see your vote as one too.
I love it.
You better tell it. Look, racism isn't something that you can defeat because you're dealing with the hearts, minds, the socialization, the tribalism of a people. But if you want to defeat racism, don't let it defeat you. Use those tools to overcome racism, to lessen its impact, to make it so it doesn't have an effect on you. So it can exist, but you rise above it because you're using the tools that you have, even the tools that racism provides sometimes, because, if a guy is assuming that you can't swim just because you're black, then you can kick a lot of butt and make a lot of money. So you got to think about how to use sometimes people's racism against them. And look, that's why we have to rise up and have that self-efficacy. I love it. Thank you, Emil.
Nah, great. And now here's another potential tool that Leo Smith brought to us last week. And it was something I hadn't heard. And so I'm going to play a little cut that at least gives the pros and cons of ranked choice voting. And then we'll throw it over to Leo to continue why he advocates for it. But this is just an objective view based on what I found on YouTube.
Hey, it's Dan Zimmerman. Welcome to Illustrate to Educate. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support more simple and objective videos on topics that matter. Also, you can now support the channel directly with the new Super Thanks feature. What is ranked choice voting and what are its pros and cons? In this video, we'll cover everything you need to know about it. Most of the elections in the United States are plurality elections. Whichever candidate receives the most votes wins. This means that sometimes candidates can win without a majority or 50% of the votes. Ranked choice voting is an electoral system that ensures a candidate receives a majority of the votes because voters rank candidates by preference, picking their first, second, and third choices and so on. If a candidate receives more than 50% of the vote in the first round, then the race is over and the candidate wins. If not, then a second round of counting commences. The candidate with the fewest first-place votes is eliminated, and their votes are reallocated to the voter's second choice candidate. These rounds continue until one candidate has a majority. So what are the pros of ranked choice voting? Supporters argue that it allows for voters to vote for their favorite candidate even if that candidate is not likely to win, eliminating the fear of wasting your vote. They also point out that it better determines the candidate with the strongest support across the entire electorate because they always receive a majority of the votes. Supporters of ranked choice voting also say that it encourages civil campaigning among candidates because instead of attacking your opponents, playing for second place is a viable strategy. Lastly, they argue that it eliminates the need for multiple elections in elections that have runoff requirements, in turn saving money and reducing hassle for voters. So what are the cons of ranked choice voting? Opponents argue that it's too complicated and causes confusion among voters. They argue that it will require education about how it works and could cause people to have a bad experience or leave without voting properly. They also point out that people would lose confidence in the voting process because a candidate with the most votes in the first round could end up losing when the votes are shifted to the next ranked choices. Opponents of ranked choice voting also argue that your vote might not count if it's exhausted. An exhausted vote happens in ranked choice voting when all of the candidates a voter ranks are eliminated and their vote goes to nothing. Had the voter known who the final two would be and selected between them, the outcome of the race might be different. Lastly, they argue that it violates the one person, one vote principle. In ranked choice voting, it appears as though each voter is voting multiple times if their first, second, or third choices are eliminated. Are you for or against ranked choice voting? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed.
Leo, I'll let you break. I know you said it's something to consider, especially now. I think that video just gives a fair take on it, both one way or another, which is, one kind of our goal here. But I would definitely want to understand your thoughts behind bringing up that. I hadn't even heard of it, so I'm definitely learning from both of you at this point.
No, I think that was an excellent illustration. I'd never seen that before, so thank you for sharing it. Bringing it home to Georgia, states are the laboratories of democracy. This is where action really happens as opposed to Congress. There's actually so much fear of ranked choice voting and the increased citizen participation that will bring. Think about it.
Right. Okay.
There are many times, especially in Black and poor districts, okay, which are not always the same, one and the same, but where people are less politically active because they work a lot of hours and so you don't see as many candidates on the ballot. So if you get to the poll or you're hearing about an election, you may not, in many districts, they don't even have a candidate for the election. For instance, we've got the Public Service Commissioner race in Georgia coming up. A lot of people will probably look at that and go, well, there's only a couple of candidates and none of them are from my neighborhood or from my community. These are statewide ballots. And so they don't even feel compelled to do it. So if you have more candidates being willing and able to get on there, you have more perspective, you have more policy ideas, you have more discussion going on, you have therefore more reach into pockets of voters who have sort of been unstimulated and now they're participating. So if you want to increase voter participation, if you want to increase voter access and voter engagement, ranked choice voting brings more people into the process, therefore more ideas, and thus more people in the way of candidates as well as in the way of ideology. And this balances the hyper-partisanship between Republican and Democrat and left and right. It balances that, decreases that rhetoric, because now a guy who is, or a gal who is supposed to win, they've got to now talk about the ideas that this third candidate might have. Because that third candidate might be more second choice or more, and then it might balance out. So this is exciting. Georgia has a Senate Bill 175 because they're so afraid of it that in our last session, Randy Robertson, one of our state senator, nice guy, but I mean, look, he proposed because the lieutenant governor wanted him to propose it, but the lieutenant governor didn't want to put his name on it. So, because the lieutenant governor is running for governor. So, but they proposed actually Senate Bill 175 to ban ranked choice voting, which doesn't really happen in Georgia anyway. So they're trying to stop something from happening even before it can happen. And boy, that just tells you how powerful.
Let me say a couple things, Amir, before you give your politically astute response. I'm just going to give the layman, deep thinker response. So as I listen to you, Leo, what I heard, when I think about, because I love history. If you don't know, I'm more of a historian. Y'all a politician. I'm a historian, if you will. And so thinking of how not only was our country founded, but in reality, even for democracies, at the end of the day, if at least had it their way, they've never wanted everybody to vote. You know what I mean? The one vote, one person thing is something that we push now because the pushback that is allowed in a republic, in a democracy, has gotten us a 13th and 14th Amendment, these amendments that were needed because the originators wanted to make sure everything was kept to themselves. So their fairness was to be amongst themselves. And you can go all the way back to Socrates and the Greek Republican highlighting that he didn't know how smart it was to allow people who were uneducated to vote. So this is a dynamic that when I hear you break down the participation of more people is music to my ears. And when you break down what you just said at the end, they're trying to ban it before it even starts. That tells you, and it highlights what we were talking about at the beginning. Congress is not listening to us. That's what you said, why we see Trump where he's at. That is such a reality that he was able to have a insurrection and still get reelected because it speaks to the power of the people being frustrated with, as you said, Congress not listening. And so I hear what you just said and love it just from the little bit I've learned based on the fact that it goes against those very people who now go in with a certain dollar amount. And even if they lose the first election, they come out much richer than the politicians used to 25, 30 years ago. Go ahead, Amir.
So ranked choice voting, according to, and I want people to go to this website, fairvote.org, FAIR vote.org. because they break down all of that video. They break down where it's happening. There are 52 jurisdictions in America right now. Maine and Alaska are the only states that have it, that use it statewide. There are a ton of states that use it in special elections. Here in Virginia, where I am, they're using it for a couple of small elections, city elections in Charlottesville and Richmond. It's in Oregon, Washington, California, Colorado, Nevada, Utah. There's a bunch of places where it is happening right now. And the point that Leo was making, I want to make as well. When you bring ranked choice voting into the system, especially in a two-party adversarial system, and oh, by the way, the history of the two-party adversarial system goes back all the way to the founders who said they did not want partisan politics, but got it anyway in the form of the Federalists versus the Democrat Republicans. And then you had other parties that showed up like the Whigs, the Bull Moose Party, and all these other parties that showed up, but it's been primarily an adversarial two-party system. And so what happens in the modern era is the gap between them gets wider and wider because they're like, it's a winner-take-all system, so I'm going to just stand on business. Well, the problem with standing on business is you alienate 80% of the people in the middle. With ranked choice voting, you got to appeal to the middle. You got to get somebody to want to vote for you who's not just going to plant a pole in their yard and say, I'm a Republican or D all the way down the line. That is what this gives us. It gives us more choice in a two-party adversarial system because the voters in the middle, the voters who can rank 2, 3, and 4 also get heard, get appealed to, and their votes all of a sudden become way more important than just staking a poll out in the extremes of the spectrum.
Just in a real quick comment, I just want people to go. So that's great. You did the fair vote thing. That's one. Then there's the Better Ballot Initiative. There's another one. But then just go look at Alaska and Maine. Okay. Look, by the way, both of them have Republican leadership. Okay. But here's the thing. What it did, Susan Collins in Maine. If you go, folks, go study Susan Collins in Maine as a Republican. What you'll see is that she moderates on a lot of issues. She is not hyper-partisan. She's a conservative, but it has made her a reasonable representative of the people, a public servant. That's the impact of it.
Nah, beautiful stuff. Thanks for bringing it to the table. And, as the more I think about it, here's another, just a big, I'm a context and perspective person as we again try to raise this conscious level of understanding why your vote matters, how you can actually play a role in this political system. At the end of the day, for as hyper partisan as we are currently as a nation, people don't realize that in general, 1/3 of the nation selects our president.
It's always that thing, right, Montoya? It's like, who did Americans vote for? Well, most Americans voted for no one.
For nobody. They stayed at home.
That's right.
Right. So a third stays at home, and then the other 2/3 get their person. And so 1/3 actually selected that person. And so just again, context and perspective, I think we can get some of those people that are at home with this type of choice. And so I would just at least say as an independent, if you hear
the voting system in America, if you go through almost every state, makes it hard to be an independent, makes it hard because the two parties have it on lock. They've written rules that favor them versus independents or third parties. So getting a third party is going to be very difficult. Ranked choice voting smooths out some of that turbulence so that perhaps someone who's not fully lockstep with the Republicans or the Democrats can squeeze in and play the game a little bit more until we can break down some of these structural barriers that prevent a third party like the Working Families Party or some of the other parties from coming in. And I shout out to the Working Families Party because they're making a concerted effort to be a strong third party. And there are several others. The Libertarians are making a strong effort. The Constitution Party are making a strong effort to try to be that strong third party. But there's structural barriers that ranked choice voting can begin to break down because those moderate candidates can come in and perhaps appeal to the base, which will then say, perhaps it's not always good to have just two choices.
And what can happen, just to give people context and perspective, it's not even a pipe's dream to think of the third party, but I do want to highlight what the process is. This is possibly a part of the process, because what will happen, as Leo argues, I want to highlight what he said a few minutes ago, is you will get a couple of other items that they have to discuss. Like when you, because as all of us, no matter, even if you're a hyper one side, by human nature, there's a one or two issues that don't make sense, even if you're with your party. Or there's one or two issues that you're mad when you go see the presidential debate. They don't even talk about that thing that's current to the times that this would bring to the table, because a third party person or someone who has an opportunity says, I'm going to latch on this issue that's for the people that neither of the two dominating parties are talking about. Then it has to be talked about. And now you can actually find out how that candidate actually thinks on the issue that's important to you, that they actually avoid at a presidential debate. So I just wanted to kind of spell it out in details that these are the steps. You becoming more involved. Don't Leo breaks down, they're trying to ban it already. We don't have to sit back. Now that I know that, if the person that's trying to ban it is in your district, call them, because it's easy to call now. Like, that's one thing that the digital divide has sped up. We talked about it last week. Literally, one of my friends has talked to two politicians in the last 2 months just simply by calling.
Yeah, and the tell on it, Montoya, as you're saying, is Democrats, established elitist Democrats, and established elected elitist Republicans, neither one of them are pushing for ranked choice voting.
That tells you it's at least a good idea.
Right? That tells us something. Right. All right, this is a daily show, so it's going to have some comedic view to it or whatever, but we've talked about how important that habeas corpus stuff was. I'm actually admitting, I'm doing some propaganda here. I'm taking a shot at this merit-based hiring. Then I don't think that this administration hired a bunch of people that were merited. So I'm taking a shot. I'm admitting.
Kristi Noem was testifying in Congress today about whether her administration is deporting people without habeas corpus, which is their right to due process. If you didn't know what habeas corpus was, don't worry. Kristi Noem didn't Google it either.
What is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
Okay, look, if Kristi Noem was just a random person on the street, I get it. If she was like, habeas corpus, that's a Harry Potter spell, right? Like, makes you invisible. But the Secretary of Homeland Security should know that habeas corpus prevents the president from deporting you without due process. Not that it lets the president deport you without due process. That's the opposite of what it means. And I didn't know you could have dyslexia for laws. Either way, Noem whiffed hard on that question. But unfortunately for her, the quiz was just beginning.
Do you know what section of the Constitution the suspension clause of habeas corpus is in?
I do not. No.
Do you know which article it is in?
No, I do not, sir.
Okay, well, it is in Article 1.
It was in 1. It was the first. You didn't even read the first one. So can you stop? We get it, okay? Stop asking her harder questions. Like, how would senators like it if Kristi Noem asked you questions that she was an expert in, huh? Hey, Senator Kim, do you know how to trick a puppy into walking into an open grave? No, not so smart now, are you? Anyway, Kristi Noem, you still don't know the basics of American law, so I'm sorry to say, we're going to have to take you out of USA.
Emil, let's just start. Obviously, we like to have a little fun every now and then. But at the end of the day,
if you watch the rest of that clip that they showed, she miraculously remembers enough to be functionally literate. But she tried to spin it. And when the spin failed, she got called out by Senator Hassan. And then she goes back and says, yeah, it's actually a constitutional right. So She started off trying to toe a line that was not at all reality, and then she backtracked into reality, but it was still ugly even after she backtracked. So I'm going to say it this way. The Daily Show is calling out the humor because many of us would be crying if we weren't laughing. It's just that simple.
And again, I'm highlighting the merit-based administration keeps giving us people who lack.
That's why we've been crying, because you're not used to this.
Montoya, you're being nice. She's a DEI hire. That's what she is.
According to their definition.
And many of them are. I mean, many of Trump's appointments are DEI appointments. They are a reaction in the opposite to other DEI appointments done by Biden and many other folks. Okay, so that's the fact of what she is, and that's acceptable because it's a reaction to excessive DEI appointments on the other side. But the fact that bothers me a lot is that not only is she in an incredible position of authority as this DEI appointment, but Kristi Noem didn't even have an answer that could have been like, there is something that the Republican and the Trump administration is arguing related to habeas corpus, and that is accepting cases of rebellion or invasion. So in other words, if she had said that, you know, the Congress has this right, you know, to make sure that people get due process. But if she had said, but, you know, we're being invaded, and that's why we're, you know, allowing the president to do what he's doing. She didn't even have that answer, which is part of their own script. So that's serious DEI.
Bro, Montoya, one of the challenges that we're facing here is that we're just not used to seeing this level of incompetence, willful ignorance. I don't know what to call it, but it's frustrating because we're not used to seeing it where you have someone at that level. And I'm going to blame staff. This is the part that I'm really going to get into. You can talk about Cyril Ramaphosa and the president holding up a picture from the Democratic Republic of Congo and saying that's South Africa. That is a staff problem. There are people who are supposed to prep our leaders, our representatives for these moments, and they're not up to task, which tells you that the hiring process across the board is struggling. It's
tore
not
up from the floor up.
No, she knew exactly what she was supposed to say, but she was supposed to have been properly prepared by her staff, and she was not. And if she doesn't go back out there and start cutting off necks and start punching throats, she's going to do this again in front of Congress and the world. I don't like it because I understand how to prepare somebody for that kind of level of questioning. And I'm here to tell you, those staffs that they've hired, to use the term the kids used in the 80s, they suck.
Hey, if I was a better producer right now, I would have a meme of Trump saying "You're fired." Right? So we're at our hour. I'm gonna play one more cut pretty quick. And again, I want to throw this out because I want to remind you, as much as we've talked politics, I still want to demand to our watchers, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, that you respect what people's personal interests are. None of us knows another person's personal interests. So whatever this show may have seemed like, I saw this very raw conversation that I thought was fair for what this sister had to say. It's very raw, got a little cuss words, just giving y'all a heads up. But I just wanted to still keep in perspective. She has a right to see the United States the way she sees it based on her personal interest, and I want to remind you, we all have that efficacy. So don't assume someone is being ignorant or voting against their interests because you don't know their personal lives. So this was somewhat intentional of me playing this cut, even though it's not as political as what we've been talking about.
I'm gonna need for all of my dumbass family because to stop calling and talk about some. Well, what do you think about what Trump doing now? You see what Trump doing now? Listen, I got what I wanted out of my vote the very first week that Trump was in office, okay? I wanted women to get their rights back and for them to stop letting transgenders play in women's sports. And I wanted them to take all of the LGBTQIA, B, C, D, E, F, G out of the schools and to stop forcing it on children and get them nasty ass books out of the kids' schools. I got what I wanted out of my vote. I wanted all of those illegal immigrants that was here hurting American women to get deported. I got what I wanted. Stop asking me. I'm good. I'm back to living my life like you don't do. Because every single 4 years, y'all dumbasses let the richest black people in entertainment stand up and tell you that you can't do it and that you being held down, when their very existence is showing you that that's not true.
Wow.
So I hope the point is made. And then again, I love the cut because it's not about me being personally in agreement, but I agree with what she cares about. She has a right to, and never would I expect that what I think is important should be important to her, quote unquote, just because she looks like me. I'm actually encouraging a diversity of thought, and I love when we're not just stuck in one party. So that's maybe a soapbox issue for why I played that. And to close out today's show, Emil or Leo, if y'all have anything y'all want to put out publicly, let me do that. And I'm also going to play a commercial from Brother Shelley for an event that he's having here in Atlanta that I think is an excellent event, a bipartisan event that I just want to share those details with after you both close out. So any public information, thank y'all for another great show today.
Leo.
Oh, look, I want to encourage everyone, if you're interested in helping out with ranked choice voting, if you want to know what's happening with it, if you want to be an advocate for it, be a surrogate or voice for ranked choice voting, contact me at Leo Smith Politics on Instagram, DM me. I'll get you connected and make sure that you're part of making that change.
I love it. Emil, anything you want to put out?
I am asking everyone who's listening to go to the original sources for anything they hear, read, or want to learn more about. If you hear about the ports being utilized less, there's the Bureau of Transportation Statistics. If you hear that people are that inflation is up or down, there's the Fed, from the St. Louis Fed. So you can go to these original sources and get the actual data. And almost always this data is presented in consumable form. So it's not like you have to be an expert to understand it. That way you can start to see for yourself if what you're seeing on the news is true. Go to the original sources, ask the question, how do you know this? So that you can learn, now I know this, and you can see the spin for yourself.
No, I love it. Again, wanted to highlight this. I just kind of took this from Shelley's show for an event that I would be attending if I didn't have to work on Sunday. I think there's a few tickets left. And then basically, as you saw at the beginning of the show, Shelley was very upset about the budget. And so this is an organization that is teaching people how the budget actually works. It's a bipartisan effort. It's called Concord Action. And so this is an event that I thought was worthy. Again, we want to not only teach you your consciousness, but if we can give you tools to actually be more participatory in our democracy, I also want to make sure we're doing this too. So I thought this was a great idea by Shelley. And again, I would attend myself if I was not working at the Braves on Sunday. So until episode 30, thank all of y'all for watching. Make sure y'all are sharing these shows with your friends. Y'all been sharing pretty well. Keep sharing and get the word out on a show that's just trying to give it to you straight, no chaser. If you're tired of the propaganda, listen to us.
Concord Action as we advocate for a more balanced budget going forward.
So go to concordaction.org, ladies and gentlemen. If you can't find it, you can go to my Facebook page, and it's on my Facebook page at the top. I just posted it. All you have to do is click on the link, go to events, and register. It's completely free. And I like to see a lot of my conservative and Democrat, whoever who's listening, we'd like to see you guys come out. We got a limited number of spaces, and we really want to fill every single slot. We're getting there, but we want to get there. And so